I can bet my bottom dollar that when you talk of the most powerful sports cars of the 1960s, names like the Shelby Cobra, the Chevy Corvette, the Jaguar E-Type, and the Ferrari 250 GTO, among other wicked vintage beasts, will surely start dropping off your lips. These American legends were synonymous with winning races all around the world, so Elle can understand why you remember them so well. But unfortunately, nothing so beautiful and powerful ever comes cheap. So, these aforementioned cars came with hefty price tags that were just too costly for the average person to afford. Then, suddenly, like a messiah sent from above, to help the poorer masses, dreaming of owning such powerful sports cars themselves, a cheaper alternative that still boasted of the famed V8 engine burst onto the scene in 1964. And that messiah was none other than the Sunbeam Tiger. This is the interesting story of the Sunbeam Tiger. The story of the Sunbeam Tiger goes back to 1959, when the British carmaker Rootes realized that their Sunbeam Alpine Series needed more power and a more sustainable engine if it was to compete successfully in the highly competitive sports cars market against its more powerful rivals. In a bid to solve this puzzle, Rootes approached Ferrari to redesign the standard Alpine's inline-4 engine. But the deal was dead on arrival. Rootes was losing all hopes of turning their dreams into reality, when suddenly in 1962 entered famed racing driver and Formula One champion, Jack Brabham. Why not fit the Alpine with a Ford V8 engine? Brabham proposed to one of Rootes' managers, Norman Jarrett. Norman bought the idea and immediately conveyed it to his son, Ian, who was also working as one of Rootes' overseas managers. Ian didn't only love the idea. He quickly went in search of Carroll Shelby, whose American company had just done a similar V8 conversion for the British AC Cobra. Carroll, of course, was never ready for such a project. When Lon asked Carroll for the timescale and budget to build such a prototype, Carroll's estimate was 8 weeks and $10,000. The two men then approached Brian Rootes, the son of the company's owner, Lord Rootes, and also the head of sales for the company, for the needed funding and authorization to proceed with a prototype. Brian's reply was, "Well, all right, at that price, when can we start? But for God's sake, keep it quiet from Dad, Lord Rootes, until you hear from me. I will work the $10,000 out some way, possibly from the advertising account." Finally, in April 1963, Carroll was fully authorized and funded to begin working on his prototype for the Tiger, which he dubbed the White Car. Barely a month later, the White Car was ready for trial runs around Los Angeles. Ian, of course, took the honor of being the first driver to test drive the car, and he chose his buddy, John Panks, director of Rootes Motors Inc. of North America, as his test drive mate. Together, the two men drove the prototype and were so impressed with the car's performance that Panks wrote an ecstatic report to Brian Rootes. The report read, "We have a tremendously exciting sports car, which handles extremely well and has a performance equivalent to an XXK Jaguar. It is quite apparent that we have a most successful experiment that can now be developed into a production car." Carroll's prototype of the Sunbeam Tiger used a Ford 4-speed manual transmission. However, the Ford V8 engine was only 3.5 inches longer than the Alpine's 4-cylinder engine it replaced, so the primary problem that Carroll encountered while developing his prototype was the engine's width. The project was not all fun and games for Carroll, as he found out that the Ford V8 engine could only fit into the Alpine's engine bay. According to him, "I think that if the figure of speech about the shoehorn ever applied to anything, it surely did to the tight squeak in getting that 260 Ford mill into the Sunbeam engine compartment. There was a place for everything and a space for everything, but positively not an inch to spare." One last major hurdle to overcome, before setting the ball rolling for mass-producing the Tiger though, was a problem called Lord Rootes. The owner of the Rootes company, named Lord Rootes, who of course had the final say over all the company's affairs, was simply not happy when he learned of all the work that had gone into the Tiger project without his knowledge. The overbearing boss felt kind of left out in the cold about the whole Tiger business. It took a lot of convincing from his son, Brian, for Lord Rootes to finally agree to have Carroll's prototype shipped from America to the UK in July 1963 for him and his team to check it out for themselves. Lord Rootes insisted on test driving the car himself, and the story goes that he was so impressed that shortly after returning from the test drive, he directly contacted Henry Ford L., the then CEO of the Ford company, to negotiate a deal for the supply of 3,000 Ford V8 engines. That was the largest single order Ford had ever received for its engines from an automaker. It was also reported that Lord Roots decided that the Tiger should be launched at the 1964 New York Motor Show, only some 8 months away, despite the company's long-standing policy that saw their cars developed from a good idea to a prototype then to a finished product in at least 3 to 4 years timeline. If you can't break a rule, at least you can bend it a bit, and that's just exactly what the Tiger did here. The exterior sheet metal of the Tiger remained essentially the same as the Alpines, but some minor chassis modifications were made, which included moving from the Berman recirculating ball steering mechanism to a more modern rack and pinion system, although twice as powerful as the Alpine. Nevertheless, the Tiger's front-to-back weight ratio remained very similar to the Alpines, at 51.7 front and 48.3 rear. Before the Tiger's public launching at the New York Motor Show in April 1964, the car was renamed from the initially floated name Thunderbolt to Tiger, inspired by Sunbeam's 1925 land speed record holder. Roots produced 2 major versions of the Tiger, the Mark I, which was fitted with the 260 cubic inch, 4.3-liter Ford V8, and the Mark II, which was fitted with the larger 289 cubic inch, 4.7-liter Ford V8 engine. After its launch in 1964, the Tiger was pegged at a $3,499 price tag, an amount that roughly translates to $32,700 today, when adjusted for inflation. 2 extensively modified versions of the Mark I that cost $45,000 each competed in the 1964 24 Hours of Le Mans car race. The 2 versions that featured in the race were both fitted with fastback coupe bodies produced by Lister. But bizarrely enough, neither completed the race due to early mechanical failures that caused both engines to overheat. Both engines were built by Carroll, but were not yet fully developed. As a result of the disappointing failure, Carroll had to refund the 2 engines' development costs to Roots. Roots also entered the Tiger in European rallies with some remarkable successes. The Tiger took the first, second, and third positions in the 1964 Geneva Rally. Perhaps the most famed feat that the Tiger is best remembered for was the fact that it held the American Hot Rod Association's national record holder over a quarter-mile drag strip for 2 whole years, reaching an astonishing speed of 174 kilometers per hour in 12.95 seconds. The 1965 version of Tiger Mark I gained some well-deserved exposure on American television as the car of choice for Maxwell Smart in the Spy series Get Smart. Some of the Tiger scenes in the series even featured some wacko modifications, such as a retractable James Bond-style machine gun that could not have ordinarily fitted under the Tiger's bonnet, so rebadged Alpine models were used instead. During the height of the Tiger's short-lived popularity, Roots aggressively advertised the car in the famed Playboy's magazine and even lent a pink Tiger to the 1965 Playmate of the Year Joe Collins for a year. A Tiger Mark I was also driven by one of the lead characters in the 1965 film Bunny Lake is Missing. Production of the Tiger abruptly ended in 1967, soon after the Roots Group was acquired by Chrysler. And that was the sad end of the Tiger's tale. Even though the Sunbeam Tiger is a car largely forgotten in the chaotic history of sports cars, there's little doubt that the Tiger was a legendary powerful sports car, arguably the next best thing to the Shelby Cobra. Yes, you heard that from me. Even a 1965 report in the British magazine Motorsport concluded that no combination of an American V8 and a British chassis could be happier than the Sunbeam Tiger. My only dream, and perhaps also the dreams of many of the Tiger's legions of fans, is for a new modern version of the Tiger to be produced soon. Only time will tell if that dream will come true. Let me know your thoughts on the Tiger in the comment section. Subscribe and check out other stories on the channel.